Well, actually, it was after about 2 hours, after John got our checks and they cleared, that he said, if you really want to learn NLP, you should study acting. And so after he hoovered out my bank accounts, I came back to Chicago and began to save my money, and then studied with a rather famous acting teacher in Chicago where I had a personal recommendation, although I never could have gotten in, and got to star opposite certain starlets whom you won't know. Iona Skye, Terry Hatchett. Yeah, I've done scenes with them. Because what they do is when they were young and they would go to Hollywood and they do studio work, they're too young. They weren't, so they'd send them to Chicago, have them do catalog work in terms of photographs, and have them study acting. And then Angelo sent me upstairs to the old lady who would then bang her cane on the floor when I breathed incorrectly. It was great fun. Also, hot water, not cold water, to keep your instrument relaxed. It'll pay off. Tony Robbins didn't know this at first, and the guy drove himself hoarse, and had to go through his own acting and voice coaching. No reason to do that yourself. So anyway, just a little something, because I know if you get to this level, you want to reapply it. You want to do something with it. Have we been taping? Oh, well. I know. No, it's all right. The acquisition of this skill, like all the other skills in NLP, is one of perception and behavior, that you're weaving between those two, that you're noticing something, and that noticing then affects your behavior. This, by the way, is why they're so reluctant in NLP sometimes to describe and discuss things, because they want you to go and have the experience. I remember when we were learning about submodality accessing cues, and they want us to get we wanted a list. But the point is that if we give you a list, then when you think of the submodality accessing cues, in your mind you'll see the list and not examples. So in a way, what you want to be doing is building up a number of examples of these patterns. I've spent a great deal of time laying the groundwork so that you can do that, but I have not done that because none of the training programs we do is sufficiently long for us to have you practice the skill a sufficient number of times to actually get it fully and completely. And I know that that's not even the case because I studied Ericksonian hypnosis what amounted to a month fully, and it was 2 or 3 years later I realized I was seeing and hearing things that I didn't know it was possible to see and hear because I was continuing to practice my acuity skills. This is a kind of acuity skill that we're practicing. So what you're going to need to do is organize a way to practice. I tell the following story as encouragement. When I was in my Master Practitioner program, I got an opportunity to do a study of physician decision strategies. That is how doctors decide. And we were given by this medical marketing firm 15 doctors who were general practitioners, 15 who were heart doctors and cardiologists, and 15 who were neurologists. So GP, cardiologist, neurologist, 15 each. And 15 is a good number for looking at a group, a pattern inside of an occupation or inside of a set. At least Roger and Ross found this to be the case. So my partner and I went in with a tape recorder and with sheets very similar to yours that we'd constructed on our own and interviewed these men and a few women about how they decided on ethical drugs. Ethical drugs? Yeah. The very first thing you need to know if you're going to be interviewing an expert is you use their terms of art. Just like we have these terms of art called perceptual positions and attention, direction, and reason. These are terms of art in our field. Every expertise has its terms of art. Those are anchors that experts use. So I didn't ask them about how do you decide to prescribe drugs. No, ethical drugs. What are ethical drugs? They're the ones that require a prescription. Only among doctors they don't say prescription as among themselves, and with their drug their pharmaceutical rep and the doctor meet, they talk about ethical drugs. Okay. Again, term of art, whatever field you're in. So first of all, we needed to know that. And then we needed to figure out what kind of criteria they were going to pay attention to. So we knew that the first few doctors we interviewed, we were actually building up the information we'd need for the rest of them. So we were careful in our choosing. We wanted to get a few from each, but we wanted to keep them sorted. And then my partner and I, with our tape recorders, went in, we'd interview them live, and we not only were grabbing the meta programs, we were also grabbing the strategy as much as we could, and the criteria. And then we had it tape recorded so we could check how much we at least had heard, since the little video cameras weren't available back then. So another thing to do is that you're going to notice what you notice, and you know what you know, and you don't know what you don't know. You're going to notice what you're capable of noticing. And as some groups I pointed out when we got into the motivation, that when you're paying so much attention to the criteria and the towards and away from, you forget to listen for how long the sentences are, right? So in that way as well, having that extra bit helps. Then we would take what we did, then we would get a rough transcription of the interview and check it again. So we were able to, in that way, take a double take on it. Remember, measure twice, cut once. And then when we got all that information, do different groupings. And this is where I found out your modeling. You find out stuff you didn't expect to find out. For instance, which representational system do physicians overall rely on most? Gustatory. It must be maybe in your country, I don't know, but they were all in America, though they were not all Americans, the physicians.
Physicians, and were they all involved in surgery?
No, I said what they were. General practitioner, cardiologist, neurologist. You'd hope visual. It was auditory. Auditory digital. They were relying on the test results they got back. If they looked at the person and there was a disagreement between what the person looked like and the test results, they would go with the test results. Because, criteria, that's what they could defend in court. So some of them actually wanted to be visual. And by the way, this caused me to have my own meta program selection when I go and pick a physician or a dentist, because I'm realizing that the occupation itself can be a constraint in terms of which meta programs are permitted. For example, with the cardiologists, my partner and I discovered that even though a lot of people tend to generalize, they tend to build the conviction by number, cardiologists disallow themselves this because with beta blockers, if you get it wrong, the patient dies. Now, they may have fixed this up in the more than decade since we did the study, but at that time, beta blockers were a very delicate kind of thing to give to the patient. Right, so the cardiologist would measure how well the patient did over a series of time, hear me, I'm doing a number, did over a span of time rather than the number of visits. So rather than taking the visits, they were going, well, if you're visiting once a week or it's once every 2 weeks, whatever, we're looking at 6 months of stability in order to determine the drug, not, oh, I feel fine, doctor, the next visit. And watching these guys and gal kind of turning their brains a little bit to do what they didn't naturally do. It's very interesting. You get over to the neurologists, who were, of course, the best paid, and it turned out, at least at the time that we were doing the interviews with the physicians we were interviewing, they really only had 2 drugs. Yeah, so they had this whole study and this whole investigation they would do of you, and examination, I believe is the correct term. And yet, after this big, complicated examination, it just came down to 2 drugs, which had an interesting effect on their decision processes because lack of choice. Yes, the ones that go to the evidence, you go to the reason and the procedures, the procedural ones were happy with that. In fact, it was their very first one we did, and my partner and I were shaking our heads because we were trying to figure it, we're wrapping our brain around this stuff, and you're going, okay, let me see, understand this right. So you'll do all these assessments, and you have all these tests, and he goes, yes. And I said, you get to the end, and there's one of two drugs. And he goes, yes. And we say, and you told us pretty much you know at the beginning, because we're listening to strategy well, that you know which drug you're going to prescribe. And he goes, yes. And I was thinking to myself, isn't that a little bit boring? And I went, no, procedures. On the other hand, when the medical marketing firm made use of the research, of the 3 they found, they decided to make use of it with neurologists. And can you guess the essence of the ad for the drug they were proposing? Not even knowing what the drug was for. A new choice. Another choice. Yeah, they were. It was about they gave them another option. It was like you have another, well, okay, you can argue with me, but the sales jumped by 33%. Yeah, exactly. That's how they decided to utilize it. When we actually pointed out that a lot of the neurologists, in fact, people that were drawn to that appeared to be pretty procedural. But as far as they were looking for something that would be easy to apply, then, and it also confirmed other stuff, because this firm sent out these long marketing letters to vis-a-vis the pharmaceutical firms to the doctors. And it confirmed that, yes, that was the thing to do, and in certain kinds of language you would use. I offer this to give you an idea of the rewards that come from practice, and also a way to create practice. Others of you might do this by deciding to interview your clients as a part of a new process you're doing. Of course, that makes them feel, well, and I'm not charging you for it, as a client of mine already, we're doing this now, and you do an interview process in that way. And another way to think about that, and I was reminded of it, is a very good friend of mine is an athlete. And so he thinks in terms of drills. He thinks in terms of taking one of these distinctions at a time and spending the week practicing that one, hearing it, and using it in different situations. There's also another way to practice, which is to get curious about the skills between each of you. I know that you've been doing modeling projects. I don't know if you are a model for somebody else in here. If you are, get together in this next exercise. Because what you're going to do is you can pick up the modeling context that you've been working on, and you can ask them about a decision in that context. For example, futures trading. How do you know when to buy? Now, there's also how do you know when to sell, right? So there's actually 2 decisions you'd want to get. But given the time we have, you'd pick, of course, the one that traders are all interested in is how do you know when to buy? It's like golfers are all interested in how do you know how to swing the golf club when there's a lot more to golf than that? But we start somewhere. So how do you know when to buy? And then going through that context and have them find a specific time with their excellence that you're modeling, and then go right into, in that context, what are the values? And find out, because remember, they're all operating anyway. It doesn't matter that it's not a motivation context. And then what are the values? And which way are they leaning and how much, if you can? And of course, the sentence structure here, you could have picked that up back here, right? And you probably already know the rep systems. And just by the way they handle themselves, you may already know perceptual position authority. But here's a way to work through it systematically to make sure you cover the 3 strategies for that particular decision in their excellence. For those of you who are not finding your model in the room, a proposal, somebody who's really different than you, who you've met in this program and is interesting in some way, whether it's how they tell a joke or how they approach people or how they got interested in the work they're in or something like that. Very same thing, is to have them give you an example of that and to walk through the different meta programs, noting them all down, such that you now have a model from the meta program standpoint that you could begin to go, oh, I wouldn't have thought to do it that way. Once again, if you're doing that, you're modeling. You're getting closer to it. And you also gives you an opportunity to try it on. Because then you can step into that world and go, okay, I've got to look at this. Geez, I thought I'd be telling them, I've got to look at this. And I thought I was going to be thinking about the people, but I'm not. I'm thinking about the information. Geez, that makes a huge difference. And so on, in those ways, and gives you an opportunity to discover how this can be added to the modeling skills you've already developed. Questions? We go through each of the strategies. Yeah, right. You're going to start with the decision, and then you just keep going. In other words, so they're in this decision and so forth, and what values are operating, and then you can ask about the question, if the values don't give you an indication of leaning, then you can ask about that. You go all the way through. You continue. You say, okay, who's the authority in here? How do you know when you're convinced you've done it well? They say, I'm the authority. What's your criteria evidence? Of course, the rep system, you've had that since the beginning, but if you didn't, you can certainly ask for it here. Yeah?
When we get the buying strategy for someone, is it usually the same buying strategy for that person in any context, like buying a car, buying a chair, buying...
Okay, so you're asking about buying strategies,
Yes,
decision process, for one particular person. I'll give you a short answer because I'm going to come back and revisit that in advanced strategies. And that is that people have strategies more based on context and how they unconsciously pick the context. As Bandler likes to joke, people have a good decision strategy and a bad decision strategy, and they can't tell the difference. But it's how they're sensitive to the context. And the second thing is this, that the difference, crucial difference between a small decision and a big decision is the representations. And when the representations go over a threshold, right, there's a shift. Well, not only criteria changes from, this is something I can make a decision about this, and now it's like, don't blow it, you know. Yeah. Exactly. So this speaks to, the reason I'm going into this speaks to the idea that if you're modeling excellence in the person, you're finding where they've got their chunk size, their scope size is something they can handle. They're an expert at it. If you want to find out how somebody's doing something in a situation here, you're going to find that the scope and so forth are all manageable, right? When you are finding the contrary to this, which we'll be getting to, then you want to be able to compare it to how they do it when they do it well. Otherwise, you're going to compare it to how you do it when you do it well, and that may not be what they want or need. This goes to the idea people have all the resources that they need. They just don't have them where they want them. So let's start with the excellent. Something that you're modeling currently for your project, something you're curious about in a partner here. Groups of 3 because you want that extra eyes and ears, just like the tape recorder, to give you that other perspective, to give you a little more of a chance of picking it up in the 15 minutes we're going to allow for each round. Now, what are you going to do? You're going to run through this pattern, find it out. You're going to counter-example it back to the person a little bit, see if you're on the track. If any of them you're questioning about, you say, well, I'm not sure what the content, it might be this, that, then you can feed it back what? The wrong way. Then you feed it back the way they like it. You go, that's it. Then you're going to try it on. And then you're going to switch. And you're going to do all of that in 15 minutes per round.
We don't have always to start with the decision.
No, you don't, but here you do. Feel free to restrict yourself. In this round,
In the real world, we don't have decisions.
Anwar, this is as real as it's going to get. Yes.
So let me see if I understood.
Right.
We are going to do
A complete illustration. Yes.
decision strategy, motivation strategy, convincer strategy.
Mhm.
We got them. Then we are going to counter-example them.
Just a little, just to play a little of it back, because if you play it back wrong, in that sense, you're going to get the feedback about what you did pick, and you're going to do another one, and you're going to see, and they're going to, no, I don't do that, and then they'll show you, and they go, oh yeah, that works. Then you're going to, okay, we're going to try it on in ourselves and find out what it's like, just like when you try on a timeline, different timeline, try it on and see, get an experience. What's that world like? See, hear, and feel as much as is possible as an active imagination. what their world might be like, given what you've elicited that they're paying attention to. All right? Let's go.